It had come up a thunderstorm that night. Dad got up, and of course, my poor dad never wasted one watt of electricity in his life. He went in to close the window, which he had left open. When he went in the bedroom, it's only him in the house, the demon was in there. I can see everything and hear everything. Mm. The demon started beating him and throwing him up against the wall and slamming him down into the floor. And it was big. It was an illustration. I had to get somebody else to do to get something out, but the one on the book, on the cover of the book, is what it looked like.
We just want to take some time to add a quick note here. There is a portion in the beginning of this episode where we will discuss the Salem witch trials, and we just want to make a quick note to let you know that during the trials here in Salem and in other countries, no witches were actually killed during these trials. It is actually more about social, religious, and political hysteria that was taking place at this time. And even the historians agree that the victims were innocent of the charges that were brought against them.
There is nothing wrong with your podcast streaming service. We now control your device. This is not a test. This is Podcast of the Paranormal. Close your curtains and stay away from your windows. Lock your doors, turn off your lights. Get your snacks and drinks ready. Get to your basement or attic. The podcast is about to begin.
Hello, everyone. Today we are here with Johnny Hull. He is an author of the book John's Ghosts, Haunted Till I Die, and he's experienced a lifetime of paranormal activity. So we'd like to welcome him to the show today. Johnny, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Again, as you said, my name is Johnny Hull. I currently live in South Dakota. I'm an accountant by training, and I've lived pretty much over a number of states. I grew up in a house in a small town in North Carolina, and I had paranormal experiences from the time I was very young enough that I was still sleeping in the bed with mom and dad. And when I say paranormal experiences, it's not that something happens every day, but it still goes on. And so I've had a numerous amount of paranormal happenings in my lifetime. I spent much of my life researching, also trying to find out about the paranormal, and I have learned a lot. My mother and father were very Christian, Southern Baptists. They were the most generous people I've ever known in my life for the little that they had. We were extremely poor, and Dad was a last remaining World War I vet.
Oh, wow.
Around the area I grew up in. And the newspaper did an article on him in 1980. They had his picture and everything. Still had his uniform, helmet. I've got it now, and everything. But they had him in 1918 and 1980.
Wow.
He was in the First World War. And Mom is the most wonderful woman that ever lived, in my opinion. She was so compassionate and cared about people.
As mothers are, yeah.
So anyway, I'm the baby of 6. All my other siblings are older than me, some quite a bit older than me. All of them, with the exception of one sister, also has incurred the paranormal stuff going on. And I'll be 80 the latter part of this month, and this has occurred for me my entire life, so it's a little hard to remember all the things, but I think that I can certainly say some of the things and say what I think about them. So if that's okay, I will go ahead with that.
Yeah, I have a question for you first, actually. Your parents, were they into the paranormal stuff?
I'm sorry, were they used to it also?
Yeah. Did your parents have experiences as well? Like, were they open to it?
Oh, well, they were open to it because it'd probably help a little bit if I tell a little bit about Mom and my ancestry. When I said I done a lot of research and everything. Actually, my great, and you would apply to Mom too, with one less great grandmother was not burned at the stake. She was hung in Salem, Massachusetts in 1692
No
for practicing
way.
witchcraft.
Oh my God.
Who was it? What was her name?
Her name was, I got this from, on the Ancestry thing,
Mhm.
Right,
Church
right.
of Latter-day Saints. And her name was Susan North, is what they got on the Ancestry thing. But she was married, and her married name was Martin, so Susan North Martin.
Okay.
And this was back, when there was witch hunts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so a number of women were burned on this date. It was July the 19th, 1692 in Salem.
Witches in Salem were hung. No one was burned in Salem. Witches in Europe were burned.
Well, witches were burned in Europe and stuff.
Yeah.
Right, but not in America.
I think there was still some in America too, but I could be
No.
wrong about that.
No.
I just know my ancestor was hung.
Right. Gabrielle's done a lot of research on
Yeah.
Salem.
Okay.
An
All
incredible amount of research.
That would explain why she.
Oh, yeah.
I thought when I first saw this, that maybe she had been.
That would explain why you found us.
It's all
I
connected.
can also tell you one other ancestor
Yeah, go ahead.
came over on the Mayflower and was the first. I can give you his name too. He was the first person to be executed. Evidently, he was a thief.
Oh,
my
wow.
I'm a blue blood, but my blue blood was a thief.
Gabrielle, she's into the ancestry stuff.
Yeah.
And her parents used to tell her that on her mother's side that they came over on the Mayflower.
Yeah, I used to say we were pilgrims. They would always say we were pilgrims. That was how they would explain it. And I did some research and I found we didn't come over on the Mayflower, but we came over during the Great Migration about 10 years later.
Yeah.
And one of my ancestors who had come over at that time had the nickname the Pilgrim.
It's remarkable. It really is.
I wonder if our ancestors knew each other.
I wonder if you guys are cousins.
It could be possible. I know my great-great, or mom's great-great. And the reason why I mentioned this to start with, because I've spent my life trying to figure out why am I like I am, listening and trying to learn and everything. And so I found out, well, gosh, my great-great-great-great, however many greats it is, grandmother was put to death for practicing witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't believe necessarily in that, but I can tell you what I do know. I experience paranormal things. I know things when the paranormal things happen. I just get information, messages sent to me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with that being said, I can imagine back at the time the witch hunts and stuff were going on in Europe and in the U.S. and everything. If it'd been me back then, if somebody had knowledge about things that there was no way for them to know about it, then, and this is what the church believed at the time, they're not getting it from us, and we're the only ones that talk to God, so they must be getting it from the devil.
Right.
If they're getting it from the devil,
Right.
they're evil. They need to be executed, But anyway, that was one thing there that I wanted to get in. And now I'm going to change just slightly here for a moment.
Okay.
I feel like I get the paranormal contacts from two sources. One is I don't exactly know what the source is, but I get messages. I have a tendency to think this is more along being good sources
Right.
that send in the messages, because sometimes I get warnings, and warnings can be life-threatening. Don't do this, or don't go there, or whatever.
If you don't mind me asking, how do those messages come through? Are they like in the dream landscape, or is it, can you like audibly hear messages? How does that work for you?
All right, there's three different kinds. Oh, by the way, I jumped from Mom, but Mom was extremely psychic. So let me just say that up front. And I never could know how Mom could just know all these things. There was no logic how she could know.
Right.
As an example, when I was around 13 or so, we got a phone. Well, and Mom cooked all the time, by the way. And so Mom, you may walk through the kitchen or something. Mom would say, go to the phone and answer it and tell so-and-so, Mabel, I'll make up a name here, that I can't come to the phone right now because my hands is in the dough and whatever message you wanted you to give them. Where the phone hadn't rung. It was a wall phone in the next room from the kitchen. So, but you never questioned Mom because you knew she knew things all the time and you didn't have any idea how she knew. And so you go to the phone, so by the time you get near the phone on the wall, by the time you get your arm extended, the phone would ring. It would be the person that she said was going to be calling. You give them the message Mom said to give them. And it's not that happened. It happened pretty often. And it'd be like, go to the mailbox and get the letter from so-and-so and the bill from so-and-so or, whatever. You didn't question Mom. You would go get it, bring it back, give it to her. Now, how could she know that? So she just knew. And that's what I call it, just know. There's no logical reason you would just know. But those messages come, so one is, I call it the warnings that's actually for your benefit. You may not understand. All right, I'll give you an example here. Once I was driving home, I was living in Florida after work. It was really late at night, and it's a real steep hill that you went up. Steep hill in Florida is only the highest point, like 100 feet. But anyway, that was a steep hill, and I'm driving up. Well, a pine tree had fallen across the road. It was all the way across the lane I was in, and it was mostly across the oncoming lane. And this was near the crest of the hill. And so I pulled off to the side of the road. I got out and walked up to have a look. And I thought, well, the top of the pine tree is was blocking me. I mean, on the other side. So maybe if I grab that top of the tree and try to pull it around, I may can get just enough I can get around it. I was getting near home. So anyway, I get this message. And the message said, it's not voice message, it's mental, but urgent, I call it danger sensing when you get to sensing. And it says, run for your life, run as fast as you can. But I've learned to listen to these when I get them. So I took off running, actually off the road a little bit, but down the road a little bit. Well, as soon as I get a short distance away, this pickup truck, it's one of the ones that's all jacked up with the big tires and everything. It crosses the hill going wide open, and it hits that pine tree. And it hit it so hard, it knocked it out of its path. And but I'm running, but it made the tree fly around, and the top of the tree hit me from, right in the back of the legs and cut me a flip.
Oh, wow.
And it hurt, but I couldn't see where I was bleeding. I didn't think anything was broke. It hurt bad. But then the truck bounced on over when it hit the tree and knocked it out of the way. It just kept on going down the road, still going wide open. I don't, never understood that. I think I would have stopped to see how much damage I'd done to my car, But anyway, so I get home and check, and, I'm bruised, but, nothing broken.
So it's more like mind speak. You hear like an inner voice that's telling you to watch out. Yeah, I get that.
Yes, exactly. Now, it may not be, loud. It may be a mental voice, but still it's telling me that.
Right.
Another example, I had my nephew who was actually 15 months older than me. I was going rabbit hunting with a guy, and he had went out in the country to do some work for his uncle. And he was on a tractor and going down and getting big trailer loads of sand and then taking it back to his uncle's house, dumping and going back. Well, what had happened, but it was about 12 feet off of a paved road. There was a dirt thing going down from the road down to the field. It was a creek bottom, and the sand was on the creek there. And he was taking the load up, but he got too far over to one side. So this trailer load of sand that weighed tons the wheel dropped off the edge, which the trailer then fell, which then pulled the tractor over backwards with it on him and fell down about 10 feet off the road. Well, the trailer hit first, so the sand was dumped, and then he landed in the sand, and then the tractor landed on top of him.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So I'm hunting. A rabbit's coming. Got the gun shouldered with the, ready to try the first shot on the rabbit. And all of a sudden I get a danger sensing thing. Something's wrong with Alan. That's my nephew's name.
Your nephew.
Something's bad wrong with Alan. So the guy I was hunting with, his name was Henry. I said, Henry, it was about a mile and a half from his house where we were hunting. And I said, Henry, can you take me back to your house? I said, I need to use a phone. Something's happened to my nephew, Alan. And he looked at me like I was nuts. And he says, I can't take you back home now. The dogs are here in the field. I can't just leave the dogs out here and leave them and stuff. And what do you mean? You got a message? And so I didn't have time to argue. So I just ran. I ran the mile and a half, burst through the door at his house, and his mother and his aunt was sitting there. And boy, they looked up in shock. And I could see it in their face, oh, alarm. We went off in his vehicle. Here I am back on foot, and no Henry and no vehicle. Must have been a hunting accident. I just knew what they were thinking. And I said, no, Henry's fine. I just need to use your phone. Something has happened to my nephew, Alan. And so they pointed the phone and said, yeah, go ahead and use it. So I called, and Alan's sister answered the phone. And I said, her name's Lavanya. Her nickname was Tukey. So, Tukey, has something happened to Alan? And she says, yes, but how do you know? I said, the phone just rang, and Alan's uncle that he was holding his hand for had just called and said, the ambulance had taken him on to the hospital. And, but how do you know? I said, it doesn't matter, But anyway, while he was buried under that trailer load of sand, his cousin, that lived there, his cousin run over and started digging out and dug like a little tunnel into where his head was. He could see a foot, so he sort of figured out where his head was and raked it out. And then he had to get all the sand stuff out of his eyes and mouth and all that kind of stuff. And he ran back up at the road, and the car was coming. He couldn't lift a tractor off of him. And so he started waving, and the car just went on by. So another car was coming. He did the same thing and went on by. So a third car came, and he picked up a rock, and it was going to go by too. And he took the rock and threw it into the side of the car. And the guy slammed on brakes and jumped out of the car and come running back. He was going to beat his fan, to hit his car with a rock. And he just pointed down, and he says, my cousin's buried under, the tractor. Then that guy was going up and just stopping the traffic. So about a dozen other guys and stuff that came by, they stopped them all. And then there was enough of them to just lift the tractor enough that they could pull my nephew out from under it. So he went to the hospital, and they said, boy, this is wild, other than having sand in the eyes and everything, that was just the tractor weight just smashed you enough down into the sand that you couldn't breathe and stuff, but it probably kept you from being broken all to pieces too.
Oh my God.
So that's what I mean by the danger sensing. Sometimes you don't know what it's all about either.
Yeah. But
I was like, when I told you about the tree. Why am I getting something say run for your life? I don't know, but I do it. So I've had enough of these that I know when I'm told, I obey. Now, that's one method of getting messages from the paranormal.
We call that our spidey sense. We like to joke around and say that because when we get...
You call it what?
The spidey sense. I don't know if you know about the Spider-Man comics.
No.
So Spider-Man has a spidey sense where he has like this inner alarm that goes off when he thinks some danger's coming. And that's kind of what I compare it to all the time. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can vouch for it's true. I mean, but I can't say everybody does, but I know it's more than me that does, you know. By the way, if you do get around to reading the book, at the very end, there's a EPA thing, at the back. Mm-hmm. And I've tried to summarize some of this stuff there and the ways in which I received these messages.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And, from the book, I'll just read. Sometimes I've received messages from the paranormal. These messages come to me in three ways, and I describe them by the manner in which they are received by me, namely as danger sensing, that's one, dream sourced is another, but it comes to me in a dream. And then the last one is, I call it movie visions. In the movie visions, it would be just all of a sudden, I'm somewhere. I'm not in the reality that I was just in, but I'm somewhere in the midst of something. And I can hear everything being said. I can see everything. I just can't interact with it. I can see it and hear it and all this stuff, but I don't participate in it. Now, with that being said, the closest thing I could come to that is, gosh, A Christmas Carol, when Scrooge, he's with the ghost of Christmas past, and he sees the school he went to, and he sees the people coming, but he can't interact. He can watch it, he can hear it, he can see it, all this kind of stuff, but he can't interact with it. And that's what I mean by this. That's the way that one is.
What are your dreams like? Do they come like as a direct message, or do you get them kind of like almost like a puzzle and you have to figure them out, like what different things mean?
The dreams are like watching a movie.
Okay.
And you're watching something. Now I will give you another one for that.
Like a premonition.
No, it's like you're there. You're in the middle of it. It's just you can't talk to it, or you can hear everything, but you don't participate in it.
Right.
And I'll tell you one here. I had gone to Carolina visiting Dad, and Dad was so bashful he wouldn't talk to you if somebody else there. So I'd have to go to the house there, and maybe 6 o'clock in the morning we sat out on the steps and we could talk and stuff. But I'm there, and I happen to look at Dad. Now, this is the only time this ever happened to me. And as I'm looking at Dad, it's like a rainbow is around his head, not front to back, but, around it. And that rainbow is pulsing out and then, withdrawing back in, out and in, out and in. Every time it comes back in, now again, it's not verbal. Mentally, I hear, though, I'm dying soon. I'm getting ready to die. I'm dying soon. Well, of course, that didn't make me real happy and all, but like I said, when I get I know to believe. And what I didn't know, exactly how soon is soon. Does that mean 2 weeks, 2 months? Yeah. Well, that was my dilemma. So after I got that message, then, that goes away. And it's just me still there, talking with Dad and everything. But it made me really sad because I've learned that I can believe when I'm told. So I knew Dad was going to die. It's not exactly cheerful. So anyway, Dad, if there was my brother and me in the room at the same time, Dad was too bashful to talk to one of us in front of he wouldn't carry on the conversation with two people. One, okay, not two. So anyway, I'm there. I got that message. And then Dad asked me something. He says, I never get to spend time with just you because, if you're not out here early in the morning or whatever, other family members come and they want to talk to you too and all. And of course, he wouldn't do that, so he just go back in the house. And he says, I want you to do something for me. I said, well, what's that, Dad? He said, I want you to spend the night with me. Now, all the experiences from Dad's dead brothers that I had while I was in the house, which I'll talk about in a minute, I said, Dad, I won't stay in the house anymore, And he says, but I want you to. And so I thought, what kind of ass can I be? That the only thing that your father ever asked you to do for him, and you tell him no? And he looked hurt. I said, Dad, I tell you what, I am not going in my bedroom. And that's where my uncle come in every night and haunted me. I said, Dad, I won't stay in that bedroom. I called it the bedroom. And I said, but I tell you what I'll do. I said, I'll spend the night with you. I'm sleeping in the bed with you. I'm not going in there. And he said, Yeah, it sounds funny, but it wasn't funny at the time.
Yeah.
And so I'm there, and Mom, I told you Mom and Dad was real religious.
Mhm.
Before Mom died, my sisters gave her back then it was an 8-track tape player and some hymns. So Mom would, she was sick with cancer, died with cancer. So she would listen to the hymns and stuff. Well, that was still sitting on the dresser. Mom had been dead for almost 5 years, but Dad didn't take away her tape player or whatever, still sitting it on the dresser at the foot of his bed. So I'm laying there. All of a sudden, the 8-track just gets up, and it's just like somebody carrying it, so it's not going, flat. It's a little bit of up and down movement, like somebody taking steps as they're walking. You'd raise and lower a little bit. Goes across the room and sits down on the Chester drawers. Over where the Chester drawers is right at the opening of the door going into the bedroom, my old bedroom. That had been my bedroom where I was haunted, which they kept shut. Then after that, I know I'm rambling all around. I'm sorry.
No, it's good.
But anyway, I said, Dad, I started using some foul language. Dad, how can you stay in this house? Leave. You can come live with me. Of course, I lived out of state. Any of us would be happy to have you, Dad. Why do you stay in here? How can you stand it, with all this stuff going on? And he pointed, he says, well, you see that bucket over there behind the heater? And I said, yeah. He said, well, when it gets dark, there's 3 doors leading into his bedroom. One from the bedroom, one from the front room, which would be going to the outside of the house, and one it went to a dining room and then on to a kitchen. Mm-hmm. He said, if I have to go to the bathroom at night, he said, after it gets dark, I don't leave the room. And his words, he said, and usually, if I don't go out of the room at night, they usually leave me alone. If I got to pee, I pee in that bucket, and then I dump it the next morning. I caught his language. Well, you mean usually? Don't that signify not always? So I'm there, and he's so bashful, he's not going to use his bucket with me in there. So he went to the bathroom. He comes back, and he is all upset. He said, it's got to be my imagination. It can't be. I said, what happened, Dad? What happened? He said, well, when I went in the bathroom, and, he said that the curtains just flew out and wrapped all around me and all from the window. He said, that can't be. I said, Dad, it can be. I said, when I was still living here, same thing happened to me, but it was in the room that I moved into out of the bedroom, which had been my youngest sister's room before she moved away and got married. The curtains flew out and wrapped around me. So anyway, this was going on with Dad. I'm going to back up to the day that my mother died. Somebody had to stay with Dad. Mm-hmm. And so, oh boy, I dreaded that because I wouldn't stay there because I'd had enough before I left home. I'm going to back on up. After my Uncle Clarence, Dad's brother, died, I try to be as honest as I can't remember for certain if it was that day or that night or the next night. Either way, I went to his funeral. I went to the cemetery, watched his, coffin being put in the ground. Well, either that night or the very next night, that same bathroom that Dad went to, which from the room I had, you'd go through the door at the room at the foot of my bed and then immediately make a right and go into the bathroom. And so usually when, Uncle Clarence had moved in with us a couple of years before, and, his last thing at night, he would go to the bathroom and then, I guess, do his whatever he needed to do and come back out, back by the foot of my bed again. And Uncle Clarence had this big old trunk he kept over in the corner of the room. He kept it locked because he had a bottle of whiskey in it. Mom and Dad's a good Southern Baptist. He had been sleeping out, at least with Mom, he had been sleeping outside, So he would come in, go over, unlock his trunk, take him a couple of good slugs of the booze and put it back in there and lock the trunk back. Then crawl into bed, and then he'd tell me stories about when he was young and blah, 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 what he did and that sort of stuff, before we would go to sleep. Well, he had moved out in January of 1960, and he bought a little old house trailer, small one, and it was about a mile or so away. In March 1960, somebody found him dead in the trailer. And that had been the snowiest year I ever remember for that part of North Carolina. And the snow was all over his trailer and everything. And the little flap, he had a little tiny little gas heater in it. There was a flap, for the exhaust to go out through the ceiling. But I don't know that it was snow got in it or wind blew the thing shut. Or anyway, the flap on top of his trailer was closed.
Oh.
He had been dead a couple of days before a neighbor went over and found him. And then, of course, his service and everything. And then starting after that, was when he started haunting me every single night. But he would go over to come back through the, come from the bathroom, past, through the door at the foot of my bed, pass through, go over to where his trunk had been because he wasn't there anymore. And he'd stand there looking down, and then he didn't go over and get in his bed like he did when he was alive. He'd walk over to the head of my bed and just stare down at me. I can tell you, he had like a confused look on his face. Never touched me. He never spoke to me. But it would scare the blooming everything out of me. And I'd just take the covers, I'm 14 years old now, and pull them up over my head. And sometime later in the night, I'd take a peek. If he's still there, put him back on me. If he wasn't, then I could pull the covers down and finish the rest of the night. It went on like that every single night for, I don't remember for sure, 4 to 6 months. Now, I'm a 14-year-old boy. You don't go to school and tell them you're seeing spooks in your house. You'd be ridiculed, made fun of, and all that. But I couldn't sleep. I dreaded going into that room at night like you wouldn't believe. The reason why I told Dad I wouldn't stay with him, because I knew what would happen. But finally, I'd had enough. And like I told you, my mother was extremely psychic. So I told Mom, I said, Mom, I need to have a talk to you and Dad. And Mom said, well, how about this evening after dinner? I said, okay. And so come evening, we ate and everything. Mom said, well, let's go in, our bedroom and sit and tell us what you got on your mind. So Mom said, okay, well, you need to talk to us about it. And I was 14 and 3 months, or 2 or 3 months old at the time. I said, Mom, I told him exactly what was going on. That every night, Dad's brother, the deceased, would come in from the back porch, go over to where his trunk was, then walk over and just stand there and stare down at me. And I said, it would just scare me so bad I couldn't stand it. I said, I can't keep living like this.
Sure, yeah.
And what surprised me, neither one of them even questioned me at all. It's not like, oh, you must be just having nightmares or something. And like I said, Mom knew things. So they didn't question me at all.
See, and I think that's the thing. Like, parents like to protect their children, right? So when you're experiencing something like that as a child, I think a lot of parents, the first thing they want to do is reassure their children that you're seeing something or you were dreaming. Nothing's really going on, because monsters don't exist, right? That's what they like to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that your parents just kind of accepted it, I mean, it says a lot. Did they offer any advice? Like, did they tell you to not confront it, but acknowledge that it was happening? Like, did they tell you to try to speak to your uncle?
No, they didn't tell me that. I'll tell you what they did say. First of all, Mom said, well, you just turned 14. What are you going to do? What do you mean you're leaving home? I said, Mom, I said, I was a fairly chubby young guy. Mom, look at this fat hanging over my belt. So I said, I can probably make it a year off of that. And I said, I'm not stupid and I'm not lazy. I'll be all right. I was just telling them there to make them feel better. I didn't know what in the heck I was going to do. I just knew I was getting the heck out of there.
Yeah.
We sat there and it was pretty quiet. And like I said, though, neither one of them even implied at all, anything about, well, it's just your man, anything like that. Then Mom said, your sister's room, which was next door going towards the front of the house, to my room there that I called the bedroom, said, she's gone now and married, lives in Virginia. Says, why don't you move into her room and see if it's any better? And if it isn't, said, then you can always leave. If it is better, fine, problem solved. I thought, I didn't know what I was going to do, I said, that's a good idea, Mom. So that's what I did. All 3 doors leading into my old bedroom, the bedroom, was kept shut. And if I had to go to the bathroom at night, it was still off of that back porch, and all. I'd go out of my room into the front room, from the front room into their bedroom, through their bedroom, into the dining room, from the dining room, out onto the screen porch, from the screen porch into the bathroom. Then reverse course and back. Mom and Dad never once complained, about that. Now, for what it's worth, I'm going to jump on ahead for just a moment. Later on, another one of Dad's brothers moved in, and he took that bedroom as his room. I'm still staying in that front room. And things calmed down some, but, even then, I didn't go past him. I'd go around past Mom and them, to the bathroom and back. Uncle Ez ended up having a stroke in that bathroom and died. But anyway, there was some things happened after his death, and I was living in Indiana. I followed my career around, but had come home and stuff. And so my wife, I had 2 daughters by then. She ended up being my ex-wife, but anyway, she and I and the youngest daughter slept in the front room where I'd been staying. And the older daughter slept in the bed with Mom and Dad in their bedroom in the middle between them. Next morning, I slept against the wall, and my wife slept outside the bed, and our daughter slept in between the 2 of us, the youngest daughter. So, get up the next morning, we've got to go back to Indiana. So we got up early. Mom fixed breakfast for us. We had our breakfast. Lorraine was my ex-wife's name. She was really quiet and sad. And I thought maybe she was homesick. It's the first time we'd ever lived far away from her parents or anything. So I thought she was, homesick. And so we ate. She stayed quiet. We drove all the way. It was all the way to Kentucky, getting close to Indiana. And all of a sudden, she started screaming at the top of her lungs and crying. It startled me. What's wrong? What's wrong? So she told me, she says, last night, Uncle Ez, that was the second uncle, the door into the bedroom opened, and Uncle Ez came walking out of the thing. Not when I say the uncles and these ghosts, I'm not talking about fogs or shadows. I'm talking about, if I was sitting there with you guys right now, I'd be saying exactly like you look right now, just as firm, everything, nothing weird looking about it. It's just another human being. And she said, Uncle Ez come walking out and walked over to her bed. Said it scared me so bad. Says Shannon had long hair, her youngest daughter. So I grabbed Shannon's hair and just put him over my eyes so I couldn't see. She says, I'm telling you right now, I am never staying in that house again as long as I live. If we go back to Bessemer City, I'll stay with my parents or one of your siblings or whatever, but I stay in a motel. I'm never staying in that house. She didn't either. And so going back a little farther, my youngest sister, before she moved out, so that's why I was still, staying in the other room, the bedroom. That was her room, that front room that I moved into. But she had gone in and went to bed one night in dark, and because Dad never wasted a while of electricity in his whole life. I put that in the book too. Of course he was poor, but he would turn out lights and stuff. So anyway, my sister Jerry going to bed, and she said all of a sudden, the door into that room opened, and a dark figure came in, crawled into bed beside of her. And she said, it said it scares so bad, she couldn't even scream, for Mom and Dad or anything. And said it wasn't there too long, though. It went back out, went out the front door. It used to be a swing on the porch swing, and I heard the porch swings creaking, somebody's in it. So she went to the front room. There's a glass door on the front door, and you can sort of look sideways at the swing. And she looked out and said, yeah, it's just swinging away. Said, no wind, nothing like that. But nobody's in it. It's just slowly swinging backwards and forwards, like somebody sitting in it and swinging.
Wow.
I don't know how long after that she moved to Virginia and started living with my oldest sister.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but telling you about these other people, almost everyone in my family experienced things there. Particularly, doors would open, close. If they were locked, old key locks used to go in them, or slide bolts. You could see the door. You could see, first of all, you'd hear the front door going to the outside of the house. The door would open and shut, and you'd hear footsteps walking across the room, and Mom and Dad's bedroom was the only heated room in the house. So that sort of served as a family room, or a TV eventually, and it used to be a radio, and all. And everybody in the room would just glance up and see. Sometimes the door would open, somebody would come in, a family member or a friend or something, and sometimes it didn't. So usually somebody would get up, open the door, and look. Nope, nobody. I grew up with that. So that wasn't particularly alarming at the time. The other thing that occurred quite a bit in the house was fireballs. These burning, not usually huge, maybe baseball size or something like that, sometimes smaller, sometimes bigger.
Yeah, I've heard stories about the fireballs.
Yeah, fireballs would just pass right through the walls, come in, and go on through the house, and go out the walls on the outside of the house. A lot of times you would see them outside too. As I was much farther along in the book when I was writing it, my brother was on the city council, should say town council. It wasn't that big. Anyway, I get a call from him, and he says, Johnny, they did a history on the area around here, and particularly Bessemer City, because it was the centennial for a little town.
Mm-hmm.
He said, so they got a book out on it. It's mostly about the area, but it does have things. Would you like to have a copy? And I said, of course. So I'm pretty far along now in the book, but I was also at a point that it got to be, I had so many nightmares because I was trying to remember. I was trying to be as honest as I knew how to be. I was trying to be as exact as I could be. That's when I told you it was either that night or the next night that Uncle Clarence started coming in and haunting me. Mm. That's because I couldn't remember for certain whether it was the first day or the second day, but it was one or the other. That's what I mean by I've tried to be as honest and exact as I possibly can.
Yeah, I get it. And the thing is, too, is like these things change over time, too, right? The way you remember them. Not saying it didn't happen, but I'm just saying even personal stories I've had, my mind starts to almost change the story a little bit. Like you start losing like the finer details. So like I totally get what you're saying. Yeah,
you do. And I'm worse right now because I've gotten older. So I have to pause every now and then, maybe glance at something and look, like in the book here. But you are correct. But I have tried, and I started the book 32 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And I started out trying to write the stuff down while, as you say, while your memory's fresher, and put it down on paper and stuff. But then there was a long break in between because the nightmares got so bad for me that, I just couldn't handle it anymore. And my wife had been on my case. Well, quit writing on it, quit writing. Well, I wanted to do it, I wanted to finish this book. But eventually I did stop for a good while. But about that book that I told you that my brother had, the history, the thing. Mm-hmm. So I got it. And, I was way far along in my book at that time, even though I wasn't writing on it right at the moment. And like the first page or so in it, and it says the early settlers settled that area from Pennsylvania and Maryland. Mm-hmm. And it was, I think might have been Dutch people. I don't remember, but anyway, two groups of people come down and settle. And said immediately, a lot of them started complaining about seeing fireballs floating right along and everything. and then just descending and going down into the ground. And the other thing was sometimes they saw ghosts descending and going down into the ground. Now, it talked about the area around and everything, but when it was starting naming some of the people, the old people that lived here and here and here and here, now this was 250 years ago. The area that would now be the intersection of 8th Street and Boston Avenue. That's exactly where this house is that I grew up in. Now, you got to admit, that's a pretty good coincidence,
Oh, yeah. Would this be around the Appalachian mountain range at all?
It is. It's at the foothills of the Appalachians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The biggest city in North Carolina is Charlotte, and it's about 25 miles or so west of Charlotte. It's hilly, but it's not the tallest mountains and stuff. Now, I've tried to think and figure out things, my whole life. Now, I don't know whether this has got anything to do with it at all, but the town started at Bessemer City, was named after Bessemer, Alabama, or actually Henry Bessemer. That's the way Bessemer City sort of started. When these people came, they found iron ore laid on top of the ground.
Right.
And they used to have a horse-drawn or mule-drawn cart, but they'd just pick it up and throw it in the cart. And the horse or the mule would pull it to the smelter and stuff.
Right.
And they'd smelt the iron. But there's also minerals and stuff, other minerals. And my grandfather on my mother's side had a grist mill. He leased it because somebody else built it. He didn't build it. That's where my mother was raised, in a house, beside the grist mill that my grandfather operated. That area ended up being the richest lithium deposit in the world.
Oh, wow.
My little town was the world's leading producer of lithium outside the city limits, but the plant they built there. For 70 years, that was the highest producing lithium thing. Now, Grandpa didn't own the mill, so he got nothing out of that.
Mm-hmm.
But when Mom and her family, sister, siblings and stuff was growing up, said you couldn't get any vegetables, anything to grow with the old gray clay and stuff.
Right.
One of I think he's my second or third cousin, he ended up being a multimillionaire trucking the stuff to the plant, from the process and all. By the way, again, I've researched stuff all my life. Lithium was the third element formed when our universe was created.
Oh, well.
And it's the lightest metal. It's so light, you could take it. It's gooey-like or sort of clayey-like. You could make a ball of it, put it in a can of gasoline, it'd float on top of the gasoline. That's how light it is.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I didn't know that.
But when you take it and you alloy it with aluminum, that's aircraft aluminum. So it's not as strong as steel, but it gets close, and it's feather-like compared to steel. That's the reason why aircraft aluminum is used in the aircraft and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, now they've decided that they're going back into production. My hometown was 5 miles from the state lines with South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're building a probably billion-dollar plant. Uncle Sam's putting in, I think, $2.5 billion into it, the government.
Mm-hmm.
And General Motors is putting in $1.5 billion, and they're building a new plant. The ore and stuff still going to be coming from the same old area, or maybe expanded on that. So my little hometown now is booming. It was a town of 5,000 or thereabouts for almost 100 years. But now they're building houses everywhere and everything. And I read, when I was reading about this going on, it said it's expected to be the biggest mining boom in the history of the world.
Wow.
Now, I've got off on a tangent, but the thing I was wondering about, because the other research and stuff was, quote, it was lithium there, blah, 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 blah. Could that possibly have anything to do with anything? But anyway.
I was going to ask, actually.
Guys, I know I'm rattling on. I moved away after I got out of college. And, I stayed there at Mom and Dad's house. I went to college, and then I got a scholarship. So I went away to college, and my occupation was accounting. So I worked for some pretty big corporations, and I lived over multiple states in the U.S., and I'm not a genius, but I ain't stupid either, but always, always, this has affected me my whole life. If my wife would be away somewhere, I'm here in the house. I call it being on guard. I'm listening. I'm still open to the possibility of something happening,
Mm-hmm.
So that still affects me. Not as bad and that sort of stuff, but still. Oh, by the way, the demons. I know I'm hopping around everywhere, guys.
That's all right.
Back to Dad and stuff. I told you Dad asked me to stay the night, and I did. But I tried to get him to leave, but then he told me, he said, Johnny, I'm not leaving. The house is all I got. And I really thought he meant financially, because we were a poor family. And I said, Dad, you can come live with any of us. The hell with his house. I thought he was talking about that's all he had financially.
Right.
I said, I'll burn the thing down. I wouldn't even go along with my occupation too well. Be burning houses down to collect insurance money, would it? So anyway, Dad said, no. He says, there's something I got to tell you. He says, a lot of nights, not every night, but a lot of nights, he says, your mother comes and she'll sit down here with me and we'll talk for a long time. And sometimes real long, sometimes not as long. And said, then your mother will say, well, I have to be going now, and then she'll just be gone. I know what people would say. They'll say that I'm just lonely and I miss Lola. Mom's name was Lola. Or I'm getting old and I'm getting senile, or this or that or the other. So that's what they'll say. Nobody's going to believe your mother comes and spends time with me and talks to me. I wished I had asked Dad, but this is the night that all the crap's going on while I'm staying there. So I'm not in the most absorbent mood. I'm trying to get him to leave. And so Dad said he would never leave. And he didn't.
I think that's beautiful.
He didn't, and it ended up being where he died, too. Now, how did he die? I told you I'd saw that rainbow around his head and stuff, or lights around, and telling me he was going to die. Well, my youngest sister and brother, she had moved back to Bessemer, and my brother still lived there. And so they come to me and says, my sister's name is Geraldine, but Jerry and Eddie is my brother, named William Edward, said, we talked. We want you to come go with us, and let's go to Norfolk, Virginia, and see our oldest sister, Margaret. And, of course, I knew about Dad was getting ready to die. What I didn't know, how soon is soon. And so, I said, well, Dad's getting old. I really need, to spend as much time with him. Well, it's not right. Your sister loves you, too. I said, well, I love Margaret, too. And I said, well, give me a couple of days to think about it. Now, what I thought was, maybe in a couple of days I can convince Dad to go with us. Now, he wasn't leaving the house, but he wouldn't. I mean, he wouldn't even think about it because he wasn't going to leave the house and miss one of Mom's trips to see him.
Right.
And my brother, he's 10 years older than me, but he was born with severely defective heart. And he was one of the earliest people to get open heart surgery, by the way. But anyway, I go, but on the way up, and I got to thinking about Eddie's bad heart. Is it going to be worse for him to find out a week later or 2 weeks later or whatever it is, or for me to sort of prep him for it? So anyway, I told him, I said, look, guys, I inherited some of Mom's ability to just know things. I said, this is not good, but I got to tell you, I got a message. And of course, they didn't doubt me either, I got a message and said that Dad was going to be dying soon. And I don't know exactly how soon is. That's the only reason why I didn't want to go to Norfolk, was because of Dad. But I thought maybe it'd be best to go ahead and tell you, so I can be prepped for it. So it was quiet, basically the rest of the way up. I got up there, drove all night, got there in the morning. It's about 400 miles. So sitting there and asked my sister Margaret, I said, because I had a good friend that was working in the shipyards there. hadn't seen in a couple of years. And I said, Margaret, would it be okay if I invited my friend Rick Thomas to come for dinner? She said, of course, yeah, he's welcome to come. But anyway, he said, well, I work in the shipyard. I can take you over. And I know my way around there and get him. So we get back to my sister's house. My brother and both of my sisters is sitting there. As soon as I walked through the door, I said, Johnny, you better have a seat. I thought, I know what's coming. No, go ahead and tell me. He said, well, Dad had a stroke last night. Now, this would have been the night we were driving up there. And our brother-in-law, Robert, my sister, had a house straight across the street, but she was already deceased at the time. So Robert went over to check on Dad and found him in his bedroom, but just leaning up against the wall. I lost it then. I thought, what kind of AH can I be, knowing your father's going to die, and you still went away anyway? I still have that problem, mainly. And so, yeah, I mean, I just lost it. I was crying and everything. And they said, well, it's probably for the best, because your sister don't drive and she's got no way, to come to Bessemer. At least she can ride back with us. Ride back with us, said, yeah, they said to see Dad while he is still alive. I said, still alive? They said, yeah. I says, Robert found him, and he'd had a stroke, so he was, out of it, unconscious and stuff, but he's still alive. And so now Margaret, boy, she went in, it wasn't 3 minutes, she was packed, ready to go, and so we drove back. Now, I drove all the way up that night, all the way back that next day, and we went straight to the hospital. And I don't think it was a room they'd put him in yet, so it might have been, the emergency room or whatever. And we go in, and Dad's in the bed, and I walk over to his bed, and I look down, and his eyes are just all jury, just dancing around. But he had to be able to see me, recognize me, because he reached his arm out and grabbed me around the wrist, and pulled me closer. And as soon as he did that, I immediately went into that dream source. I can see everything going on. I can hear everything and all, but, I can't interact with it. It had come up a thunderstorm that night. Dad got up, and of course, my poor dad never wasted one watt of electricity in his life. He went in to close the window, which he had left open. When he went in the bedroom, it's only him in the house, the demon was in there. I can see everything and hear everything. Mm. The demon started beating him and throwing him up against the wall and slamming him down into the floor. And it was big. It was an illustration. I had to get somebody else to do to get something out, but the one on the book, on the cover of the book, is what it looked like.
Okay.
And so my nephew, my sister's oldest son, Dennis is his name. By the way, when you do look at the book, and you'll see all those drawings in there, he's a heck of a good artist. I described to him on some of the stuff what it looked like, what the demon looked like, and all this kind of stuff. He did a darn good job. And so that's the illustrations you see in the book. It came from him. My wife now tells me, well, that looks too much like an alien or something like that. Well, that's what it looked like. I can't help it.
It's green. Yeah, I get it. Yeah. Yeah. I did, when I was reviewing the book, I saw the cover of the book, and I was like, oh, yeah, that does kind of look alienish.
And it was big. It was about, I'd say, around 7 feet tall and everything, and no clothes or genital tools or anything like that you could see. But it did have the red eyes with, some slits in it. But anyway, I watched the whole, for want of a better term, movie and everything. And Dad was, like I said, he was still, his voice was as jittery as his eyes. I said, he was trying to tell me, I said, I know, Dad, you went into the bedroom to close the window because you thought it might rain in it.
Oh, wow.
And something bad was in there and it got you. And he says, yeah, Johnny. Yeah. He says, I tried to get away, but I couldn't. But when I'm watching the movie, I see it finally take Dad and just throwed him up against the wall, and I heard a big pop around his leg. And then the demon looked satisfied then, and then he just vanished, Mm-hmm. And I told Dad, I know, Dad, you went in there and this bad thing was in there, and it got you and it hurt you. And he says, yeah. He said, I tried to get away, Johnny, but I couldn't. He says, I crawled back into my bedroom, and he says, but I couldn't get myself back up on the bed, so I just leaned against the wall. And Robert come up and found me, and called the hospital. So the announcement came on, visiting hours was over, you got to leave. And of course, my siblings were older than me. And so I told them somebody else had come up, another relative had come up from Bessemer. Don't remember who it was. And I said, well, so-and-so's here, ride home with them. I'm going to go try to get a prognosis on Dad's condition. But I knew that thing had broken his leg. I heard the pop in his leg and loud pop. And so I went back to the emergency room and asked somebody, look, Dr. So-and-so was, in the ER. My father was his patient. And I would like to talk to the doctor. I want to get a prognosis on Dad's condition. I said, can you tell me maybe where his office is? Or what? He said, yeah, it's just 2 blocks down the road here. And I said, okay. So, I went down and went in, and receptionist, and I told her, I said, I'm Johnny Hull, son of Dawson Hull, who was admitted to the hospital early this morning, Dr. So-and-so, and, I just want to talk to him. She said, okay, have a seat. It was probably not even 10 minutes, and it was about 4 o'clock. He comes out and says, well, come in, Mr. Hull. And, we shook hands, introduced ourselves. And I said, I want to get, prognosis on Dad's condition because I'm going to have to be going back to Florida for my job. And because I was in charge, somebody had to do it. And he said, yes, Mr. Hull. He says, your father is suffering from, and he rattled out a big long name.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Doc, I have no idea what that's saying. I said, can you give it to me in layman's terms? He said, well, in layman's terms, I didn't want to tell him this. Your father is suffering from instant insanity. And said, I didn't want to tell him, but he said, in cases like this, usually he'll have to remain in a straitjacket for the rest of his life, or he probably will commit suicide. And said, I didn't want to tell that to them at this point in time. And of course, that wasn't good news. I said, well, Doc, I said, what are you doing about his leg that's broken? I said, it's hurting him. And he looked at me, Mr. Hull, your father doesn't have a broken leg. I said, Doctor, he's got a broken leg and it's hurting him. I want to know what you're going to do about it. He said, Mr. Hull, your father does not have a broken leg. I sat down in the chair in his office. I said, damn it, I'm not getting out of this chair. I'm not leaving until you get on that phone. You call down to the hospital. You tell him to take him in and x-ray his leg because it's broken. Now, if it isn't, I'm happy to pay for whatever it is. I'm not leaving here until you do that call. So he called. Well, I wasn't sure whether he was calling the police or the insane asylum. But he called, and then about 10 minutes passed. The phone rang. He answered the phone. His face went white. He turned around and he looked at me and he says, Mr. Hull, your father has a broken leg.
Oh, wow.
He says, I'm sorry, nobody here picked up on that when he came in because we thought he was having a stroke. And I said, well, okay, just give him something for the pain. Well, what are you going to do about his leg? He says, unfortunately, his leg's swelling now. And so we won't be able to put it in a cast with it swelling. He said, and it might be a few days, it might even be a couple of weeks for the swelling to go down to where we can then put a cast on it. He says, but we are giving him pain medication for his leg. I want you to know that. I thanked the doctor and said, all right. His obituary said that he died from results of pneumonia from his broken leg, which is true, I guess, but that wasn't why he was there.
So we decided to stop the interview there. There's going to be a second part.
Yeah, Johnny had a lot of really great stories to tell us, and we thought it was best to leave them all in.
Yeah.
Instead of choosing which might be best for the podcast, just because they were all really interesting, and they kind of seemed to serve to show just the fact that he really has had a lifetime of these experiences.
And it wasn't just about the paranormal experiences either. It was basically like these stories were part of his life.
Yeah.
I could have edited this in a way where I'd have just the paranormal stories.
Mm-hmm.
But the way he told his stories was just so intriguing.
Right.
That I just left it all in.
Yeah.
He tells a story from his point of view, his experience growing up, with his family and all that. And he just tells it in a way that it's just, I could sit there and probably listen to him for hours. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like talking to my grandpa.
Yeah, he's a
in a way.
great guest.
Yeah. So, when you get into it, he starts out a little slow, but he's building that story.
Yeah.
As you're listening, it all comes back full circle. So he has a structure. He knows, how he wants to tell a story.
And they really do build on each other.
They really do, yeah. So what a great guest.
Yeah, he really was. We hope that you'll come back for the next episode to hear the conclusion of his stories.
Oh, yeah, part 2.
Yeah.
Yep. So curiosities.
Yeah, we more vendors at an event in early February here in Scranton. We want to thank everyone who came out to take the time to talk to us and just kind of get to know us a little bit better. It was really great being able to talk to people. We were busy the whole time. We weren't expecting that. It was a fantastic event.
Oh, yeah, we didn't even have a chance to go look around. And
No.
No.
It was great.
Which is fine. We spent less money.
Yeah.
Kind of.
And it was really interesting to see how many people really are involved in this field here in northeastern Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah. We had some wonderful guests that were talking to us. We had a person that was talking to us about remote viewing. And what else did she do?
Automatic writing.
Automatic writing, yeah.
Yeah. And then we had a whole family who was involved in different types of religions that also have magical practices. And that was so interesting to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're hoping they contact us, right?
Yeah. Definitely
Give us
hoping.
a call, have them on the show,
Yeah. Yeah. We'd love to talk to them. If you're listening, reach out. We'd love to have you on as a guest or collaborate together.
That's a good point. How do our listeners get in touch with us if they want to tell a story?
Yeah, you can go to podcastoftheparanormal.com.
All one word.
You can find links to our social media there. You can find our episodes. You can find all of the different places where you can listen to our episodes. If you listen through Apple, through Spotify, through Amazon Music, like our podcast, rate our podcast if you're enjoying it. Leave us some feedback. Let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear, good or bad.
Yeah, visit
Please.
us on social media.
Let us know where you think we can improve. If you think that there's room for that, we'd love to hear from you.
And we're always taking interviews, so hop on the website, like we said, and
yeah, we have a contact form there. You can reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for listening.